In that school, it was unusual to like math. No one liked math. I think there was a handful of people. And then we got this professor that really was on the caliber that could have gone to a gymnasium, but he ended up with us, and he was incredibly frustrated that no one liked math, and he kept trying to teach us something, and the half of the kids or more couldn't care less. And so he was, he was the determining factor in my decision to go and learn something more than just economics. You just kind of feel you're neither here nor there, and I don't think that ever resolves. I think you just end up being in two different places at once for the rest of your life, and then, the second generation feels like they are Americans, and that's about it.
Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indi Gupta, and I'm your host. Today we're talking to Jelena Mirkovic, who is a research associate professor at the University of Southern California in the Information Sciences Institute, where she works on security aspects of networked systems and distributed systems, especially botnets, denial of service attacks, IP spoofing, and she's also known for her work on security testbeds, including the well-known DeterLab testbed. Before USC, Jelena was a faculty at University of Delaware from 2003 to 2007. And yet before that, she received her PhD from UCLA, where she was from 1998 to 2003. And before that, Jelena got her BSc in Computer Science, Bachelor of Sciences in Computer Science from the University of Belgrade, School of Electrical Engineering in what is today known as Serbia, and back then was the erstwhile nation of Yugoslavia. Welcome, Jelena, to the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast, and thank you for being willing to share your story with us.
Thanks, Indy, for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your childhood and growing up in the Serbia, Yugoslavia region. It's probably Yugoslavia when you were a child there.
It was Yugoslavia, yeah. So I was born in 1974. And that was 6 years before Tito died and before Yugoslavia started falling apart. So I grew up when we were still together and everyone was supposedly liking each other. And, as kids, we really grew up in this environment where we were taught that this is one country, we are one people, we were always meant to be together. And the ideals of the both the union and the fight for the union, which was actually occurring during the Second World War, and the communist ideals, these were all merged together into one story. And I think this story is still with me. I think this story is still with everyone that kind of grew up in that same time frame. Mm-hmm. We still feel like we are part of Yugoslavia. We really, the 90s and the wars were kind of, nightmare that interrupted this dream of ours, but the dream is still living. We are still feeling more part of Yugoslavia than any single country that resulted from the split.
And did the transition from Yugoslavia to the countries that are today, that transition happened when you were a child?
Yeah, it started when we were, when my generation was in like late teenage years and throughout the early adolescence.
And did you see that change the way in which math and science subjects were taught in schools, the content or the way in which it was taught, or did that just not change much?
No, that did not change at all. I think maybe the only subjects that changed in school were the language. So each individual republic started, putting emphasis more on the language that was particular to that region, as opposed to, what we used to call Serbo-Croatian, which was taught everywhere before the split. So in Serbia, we saw more emphasis on using Cyrillic rather than Latin alphabets. When we started, before the conflicts, we were doing both alphabets at the same time. So, 1 week we would use Cyrillic, 1 week we would use Latin, and it was all taught equally. And then there was more emphasis on Cyrillic. And I believe history, the way we were taught history changed somewhat. But the math and science didn't change. That was always the same.
Was the math and science syllabus or content of what it was taught, was there commonality? Do you know, was there commonality between how it was covered in Yugoslavia and how it was covered in the USSR or other countries in that neighborhood? Was there an influence there?
So we weren't really under heavy influence of USSR because we were, in a way, independent between East and West. We were one of a few countries that kind of avoided
the non-aligned movement
under USSR. But I believe that some aspects of teaching science did come from USSR, and I remember, preparing for math competitions, we would use Russian books with the problems to prepare.
What got you interested in science or math at an early age, or were you not interested in science and math at an early age?
At an early age, I think I was interested in everything. I was just, I loved school, and I got exactly what was being taught. I liked it. I understood what I was supposed to do. And school in Serbia and in former Yugoslavia is different than school here, because we start going at 7 years of age into the first grade. And we start getting grades almost immediately. I believe the first grade is still like, I don't know, bees and flowers or something like that, but then the second grade, definitely you start being graded. There are many tests. There are many, opportunities for you to get a grade throughout the year. And you always know where you stand with regard to that subject. If you're doing well or poorly, you know where you stand with regard to the rest of your classmates. So you know if you're like number 1 or number 5, or like I'm better than that person, but I'm worse than this one in this particular subject. So I know that in the US this is viewed unfavorably, like this type of schooling. Maybe kids get they get discouraged if they're not doing well, but at least in my experience, I found it as that it boosted my performance. I liked knowing where I stand, and I liked when I get a good grade, and so I did the work. And in the elementary school, I liked almost any subject. I couldn't really decide what I wanted to be. It was only in high school when I got a really good math teacher that was really, interested in teaching math and giving us hard problems that I started liking math a lot. And this was also, the high school was the first time I had an encounter with computer science. So we had computer science in the 9th grade. And that's what got me hooked into computer science. I really liked programming. I liked everything about it. So I decided at that time that I wanted to go into computer science.
Tell me about the math teacher.
Oh, he was wonderful. So I should start by saying I did not go to mainstream high school, or what would be called gymnasium. Here, I went to trade high school because my parents were older and they were worried if they died, what would happen with me if I only had high school and I didn't have a chance to go to college. And so
there were two different kinds of high school there?
Yeah, so there were two different kinds of high school. One kind, which was called gymnasium, was to prepare you for college. And that had a fairly broad range of natural sciences that were being taught and some social science. And after you graduate from gymnasium, if you don't go on and graduate from college, it's fairly difficult to find a job. So my parents were concerned that, should they die and I couldn't, go on with college, what would happen with me employment-wise. So they advised me to go into what is maybe parallel here to trade school or associate degree, I'm not sure. So there were a handful of schools that were doing that. One was economics high school, and so that's what I did. My father was, he graduated with a degree in economics, and he said, well, it's a good profession, you might want to do that. Everyone needs an accountant or, and so I said, okay, at that point, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. My dreams were from movies. I wanted to be an astronaut or a pilot or something like that. So I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. And I just went into that economics high school. And so the reason why I bring this up is that school really didn't have strong teaching in math or physics or any of the natural sciences. We had only 1 year of physics as opposed to 4 years in a gymnasium. We had, I believe, 1 year of chemistry. We had 4 years of math, but math was not supposed to be as rigorous as in gymnasium. And then we had just a bunch of economic subjects, accounting, typing, all sorts of things, and then some, history and stuff like that. And so in that school, it was unusual to like math. No one liked math. I think there was a handful of people. And then we got this professor that really was on the caliber that could have gone to a gymnasium, but he ended up with us, and he was incredibly frustrated that no one liked math, and he kept trying to teach us something, and the half of the kids or more couldn't care less, and so he was he was the determining factor in my decision to go and learn something more than just economics. So I really liked what he was teaching. I was doing well in his class. Then he suggested that we could go for math competitions. And we went for 3 years, and we won all 3 years. Mm. And that was amazing. And I just loved every minute of it. This was special kind of competition only between the economics schools, because as I said, we had less math than the gymnasium, but it was still enough to really awaken the love in me for more math and more natural sciences.
And so this was, what year was this approximately?
This was 10th grade of high school, so 10, 11, and 12.
It sounds like the math teacher encouraged not just you, but also several students in the class to love math. So it seemed like you were a role model and a mentor as well.
Yeah.
Your first introduction to computer science was also in high school. Was that through programming, or was it through what?
It was through programming. We had one class that was the only class available. It was called informatics, I think, in the 9th grade. And that was the first time I've ever seen a computer. We were learning BASIC, and we were learning just, hello world and this and that. And I remember liking it so much, I would come after class and, try to program. We had a trivia show on TV called Quizkoteka, where, there are certain questions and answers, like multiple choice answers, and you have to choose one. And I would program that in BASIC as a like a mini game. And then later I had math in grades 10, 11, and 12. And then, that kind of sustained me, my interest enough to go into electrical engineering and computer science, which was a very different path than 99% of other students from that school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll ask you a little bit later about your experiences in the electrical engineering. Mm-hmm. I want to ask a little bit about your parents. You earlier mentioned your father. Were your parents, I guess you mentioned that your father was an economist, or is an economist. Were your parents involved in math, science, computer science at all?
No. So my parents they were born both in a village, different villages. So my mother was born in a village in Croatia. And she, she had a very difficult life. She learned her schooling was interrupted by war. She learned to read only as an adult, and went to finish I'm not sure even if that was like a high school or just like a 2-year degree for a dental assistant, and she ended up having a career as a dental assistant. And my father was born in a village in Serbia, and then finished only elementary school and ended up being like a firefighter for a good part of his life until he met my mom fairly late in life. And then they relocated to Belgrade, and he ended up finishing high school and an associate degree late in life, post 40 years old, and then ended up working with economics degree in a post office.
And they were encouraging of you pursuing your interests in math and computer science.
Yes, they were. So there is a culture in Serbia, and I think it's probably paralleled by cultures in Russia and China, for as much as I can tell from, meeting people from these cultures. We really value education. Everyone values education in Serbia, or at least used to when I was growing up. So even if you were doing, any kind of really physical work, you would want your kids to do well in school. So everyone really put a high emphasis on that.
That was not just your family; it was a lot of the families around you.
Yeah.
Parents really
everyone wanted their kids to do well in school. Grades were very important, and we saw education as like, this is, this is your job as a child, to do well in school, and this is a ticket for doing well later in life, for getting a good job and being successful in life.
This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Jelena Mirkovic, computer science research professor at USC and immigrant from Yugoslavia. Returning to programming, so you mentioned BASIC was your first language.
Yeah.
Was the computer that you programmed BASIC on, was that at home or was that in the school?
No, that was in school. I didn't have a computer at home until the last year of the undergraduate degree.
And so you essentially did your first several years of programming, including the undergraduate degree, without having a computer.
Yeah. It was, I think, now that you mention it, it does sound strange given how education is here. But yeah, we only had access in school or at the university. There was a computing center, and we would go there and work. Yeah.
Let's talk about your transition to University of Belgrade. How did you come to select computer science when you moved to university?
Okay, so the schooling works differently there too. So you don't really select your major. You have to decide when you're applying to the university which major you are. You cannot just easily switch like here. And so I was deciding, I mentioned to my math teacher, to the one that I looked up to, that I wanted to go into computer science. And I said, I'm deciding between applying to for a math degree or for a electrical engineering degree. So these were two schools that were teaching computer science. So, and you would start with this basic degree, either math or electrical engineering. And then by the end of your education, maybe in the last 2 years, you would get more computer science topics and less these, let's call it general education topics. It's really not general education, but like in electrical engineering, you learn about electrical circuits and, telecommunications and, this and that. And then later you would go into and learn more about programming. And so when I mentioned it to him, he had, nice chat with me and said, well, I don't think that you should do math. I think you should do electrical engineering. There's more practical aspects of programming being taught in that school. He had me meet a few young math professors that joined our high school that graduated from that, from the math degree, from the math school. And they gave me the, firsthand advice how it is on in math school in Belgrade, and so at that time I was still undecided. I still thought I would go and into math. I didn't know much about electrical engineering, and I was a little scared that there would be a lot of just a lot of kind of low-level electrical circuit topics that I wasn't into. And then I wasn't sure how I would prepare for there is an entrance exam in both of these schools, actually in every school in Belgrade you want to go into. And I wasn't sure how I would prepare for electrical engineering because I had to prepare both math and physics. And as I mentioned, we only had 1 year of physics as compared to 4 years in gymnasium. So I said, well, no, I'm gonna do math. Like, I'm fine. And then I went home from school, and on the ride home, I was thinking about what they said, and it was, sinking in that maybe I should do electrical engineering. And so I remember just getting into our apartment and saying to my mom, oh, I decided I'm gonna do electrical engineering. She was like, okay. Mm-hmm. But that was, that's how I decided. And then, he helped me, the math professor helped me find the prep courses for the entrance exam. So I went to there is a famous gymnasium that has, it's called Math Gymnasium in Serbia, that has, all the best students and all the best teachers. And so they were offering prep courses for physics and math, and I did the physics one, and that helped me pass the entrance exam.
This entrance exam was just for the University of Belgrade or for several universities?
This was just for University of Belgrade.
I see.
Yeah, but the others have comparable exams. So you go thousands of students go into these big exhibition hall, and they take the exam.
So it's these major universities, each of them has their own entrance exam. So like Belgrade and then Novi Sad and then maybe other places. And the main subjects you mentioned were physics and math?
Physics and math. Well, so it depends on the major. For electrical engineering, it was physics and math.
So this is a one-shot thing, right? So you go in there and you do the exam. If it's your day off, then if it's a bad day for you, then you don't do well.
Exactly. Well, you can always, wait a year and try again. Yeah, but that's what it is. And you get some points based on the exam. I forget now how much it was, but it was maybe half of the points were from the exam and the other half were from your GPA from the high school, and that all adds up and determines your place on the list of the students that are allowed to enroll.
So it's half from the exam and then half from your school performance itself.
Yeah.
And then based on that and based on where you are in the priority list, whether that section is full or not, you're going to get your preferences.
Yeah.
So as you entered college, you already knew that you were into electrical engineering and
computer science.
And
not
computer
electrical engineering. Yeah.
Maybe into computer science.
But I entered, into a school of electrical engineering.
Right. And then tell me a little bit about how your interests changed or how you started getting into research, if at all, that happened during your undergrad years.
That also happened due to a teacher. So we had a 5-year degree. Until the end of maybe third year, I had no idea about research, or really, we had very little exposure to computer science subjects. Mostly it was electrical engineering. And then after that, years 4 and 5, we got more computer science. And then there was a confluence of events. So one was I started working more with a professor that was teaching a bunch of topics related to internet, and he wanted, he suggested that we could do some exploration of an idea he had. So me and a few other students started working on that. The exploration was better internet search. So we were, that was the time when there was no Google. There was Yahoo and Alta Vista for searching, and you would get really bad matches coming back. And so we were working on some genetic algorithm that would improve the matches. And it was fun. It was really fun to work on something as open-ended as that. I loved it. But I don't think at that time I realized that this is called research, or that it might lead to graduate studies. I actually had a very different entrance into graduate studies. So when I came into my 5th year, I realized that a lot of my peers are thinking about graduate studies. And I started thinking about it too. And this sounded like a next step. It was, more school. I know I'm doing well in school. It was in a different country, so it was all a big adventure. And so I started applying really not knowing what research is, or, what...
It was just something fun for you.
Yeah, what's graduate school all about? I just had no clue. Yeah. And I think it took me... When I came here, it took me about a year to understand what I'm expected to do, and how to do it, and then I got really into it again, mostly because I got exposed to good teachers and also to good topics that sounded interesting.
Again, it sounds like there was a mentor and a research advisor who really kindled your interest in doing fun things, which also some people know as research.
Yeah.
So the degree in Belgrade was a 5-year degree from what I'm understanding. Yeah. And the first few years were focused on the lower level hardware-ish stuff. And then the last few years more on the higher level. This is kind of somewhat different from how computer science is taught in U.S. universities.
It's very different, yeah.
Do you think there is an advantage to teaching it the way you learned it?
No, I actually think that it would have been better if we could. And I think that university now is changing. There is more an earlier focus on computer science. The last I heard from that university, they were thinking of making a computer science path that would start from the beginning of the entry into that school of electrical engineering. You could be on the computer science path immediately, and I think that's better. I think when I came, it maybe wasn't that obvious, but I felt very old-fashioned in a sense that we never had really a course in networking, and I came in. And I started working, I started taking courses that were called advanced networking. And I had no idea about anything network related. So I had to really catch up. I had a big gap. We never had database course. Well, actually, we did. Let me correct myself. We did, but we never really worked with a database. It was all kind of blur. There was very little practical exposure, and everything was taught on a blackboard, and you copied it, and there were textbooks, but there was really nothing hands-on that you could do until the very end. And even there, it was a little bit of a hands-on experience. So I felt that we really were behind the world at that time.
I want to ask you a little bit about women in computer science in Belgrade. Would you say there were a lot? Would you say there were few? What was your memory of that?
I would say there was a fair number, maybe not 50%, but it was a fair number. We definitely weren't we weren't a significant minority, let's say. Maybe my estimate would be maybe like 30 to 40%.
That's a healthy percentage. And my understanding from what I'm hearing from you is that the encouragement of parents for their kids to go into math and science played a part in that, and there was no strong social bias against being in math and science.
Yeah, there was no social bias at all against it. And I think that what parents perceived was that there was a handful of schools, there still are, in Belgrade that are regarded as prestigious. And so School of Electrical Engineering was definitely, one of those near the very top, if not on the top. So everyone would be proud for their kid to go there. It was not in any way socially unacceptable for any gender to go there.
When you were in college, those were pretty turbulent times, politically speaking, for that region. How did that affect your experience of being in college, or your interactions with your family, or your life in general at that time?
I think at the time, this was actually less turbulent than the high school years, because high school years were when everything was just starting and we were all new. So the end of elementary, maybe the last year of elementary school and the whole high school was when the wars were either brewing or they were starting. And there were a lot of friends that, had brothers drafted into army and, coming back looking and behaving as zombies and, with PTSD. And so that was that was a big unknown that impacted all of us, I think, at that time. And then when we went to university, for our generation at least, there was more turbulence in Serbia. There were demonstrations against the regime, and we all participated in those, and we were hoping that this will make a difference, and it wasn't really making a difference immediately. It took years and years and years. And I think there were increasing sanctions on Serbia from the outside. So what happened by the end is that when we were leaving for the US, we actually were flying out of Hungary because the Belgrade airport was closed to international traffic. So there were these aspects, but I don't remember it affecting me that much at the university as in high school, because I think it already got old. By that time, we accepted that we are in this long war, and that's it.
It was just a way of life, and most students have internalized it. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your transition to the US. Did you want to come to the US, or did you consider other options? Or was it just the choice of school here that you got into that made you come here? What attracted you to the US?
I wanted to come to US. I think this was, everyone else that I knew was coming to US. So for me, it was really not, I did not consider applying to places in Europe. They seemed to me like a second choice. I wanted to to go to where everyone else is going. And, all the famous universities are in the US, so it made sense. But it was also, on my part, it was also curiosity because we were exposed to, a lot of US movies and culture. And so it was, this dream place where you want to go and, see what's on the other side.
And did a lot of your classmates also come to grad school, or what?
Yes, a lot of them did.
Was that typical for that time, or did that change?
It was typical for that time. Everyone who could leave was leaving, yeah. And even friends who did not leave immediately ended up leaving a few years later.
I see.
And they left to various places. So now if I look back to that cohort, a lot of them are in the US, but there are a lot of them in Europe too, or in, Saudi Arabia, Australia, like wherever you want, all over the world.
And do you think that has changed in Serbia now, like in the present day? I'm sure you're in touch with the University of Belgrade there, and you try to recruit students from there. Do you think an equally large fraction of students are coming here to the US now than they used to?
No, I think it's better now. I think economy is better. There are a lot of foreign companies that are now in Serbia that you can work for and get a decent salary. Opportunities are better now for young people than that.
Okay, so now that you're in the US, what was the most difficult thing for you to adapt to? I think you mentioned one of them earlier, just needing to take these advanced courses to bring yourself up to speed. Were there other things that were kind of difficult or challenging?
Well, a lot of things were challenging just around the fact that you are alone here and all your family is back home. And I think this is something that maybe, Americans don't get as much about immigrants, that when you're coming, you really don't have plan B. You're coming, that's it, right? And it has to work. And there is no other way for you to salvage the situation if it's not working. So I think that was, we came, most of us, with all the money that our parents could spare. Which was enough for maybe a month or two of living expenses here until we get our first salary, and that was it. And I remember coming, and renting the apartment here, not knowing that we need to give the first month and the last month deposit in addition to paying the rent. So that was a big part of the money that I brought. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I spent all this money and now I'm not sure how I will pay the next rent. And I just came and I'm in trouble. I have no idea what to do. And as an international student, you're not allowed to work. I would have gladly, found some job, but I couldn't find anything because you're not allowed. So I was just running in circles. So that was a big problem. And I had a friend who came the same time I did, who lent me some money. So he had some money that he brought from people gave him money to pay for their GRE exams, because you could only pay when you are abroad due to sanctions again. You couldn't pay from Serbia. And so he lent me that money saying, I need it in 3 months' time, but, there you go. And so 3 months were enough for me to kind of bootstrap things and pay, earn some money and pay him back. But that was, it was a rocky start, but it was definitely interesting. And I think, after that, I felt more self-confident. I was like, okay, I weathered that. I can weather other things. So that was one thing. I think the other big change was that people expected me to attend classes here. Back home, you don't really have, attendance is not required. It's optional, so you can either go to lecture or you can borrow somebody else's notes who went to lecture and then learn from the notes. But teachers here really expected everyone to be present in class, and they were surprised if I would miss a class. So that was a cultural difference. The other difference was that the way exams work here and back home is different. So exams here are throughout the class. You have the midterm and you have the final, and it's a one-shot thing, right? Or you repeat the class. Whereas back home, you have the class, and then after class, you have multiple chances to take the exam, up to maybe 4 or 5 times that year. And then if you don't pass it, or if you maybe pass it with a grade you don't like, you can cancel it and try again. And then, that's pretty much flexible when you actually pass that exam. And then once you pass it, then more courses open that you can take.
So that's a more forgiving system.
Yeah, well, in a sense, I think the exams are harder in Serbia because they are, in many cases, oral exams, so you don't know what's coming and you have to be prepared. But it is forgiving in a sense that if you're not feeling well that day, or you overslept or something, you have another chance.
You touched on many things that a lot of immigrants experience. The bootstrapping, lack of money, the feeling that, I've gotten most of my parents' savings and I'm just using it to pay rent at this point. The needing to attend classes and just the different way of instruction here. And of course, feeling alone, and there being no option to go back, and failure not being an option at all. Was there a community of Serbian students or people that you knew that helped you in your first few years here?
There were some friends that came at the same time I did, and that was helpful. We weren't really close friends at the time. We became close friends after coming here. But we knew each other, and then over years, more people came, and I met more immigrants from Serbia and from really ex-Yugoslavia. And then later, when I went to work in Delaware, which is a rather small place compared to LA, I thought, well, that's, there will be no one from Serbia, but there still was. There were quite a few people from Serbia, so I believe we are everywhere.
You're listening to the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast interview with Jelena Mirkovic, computer science research professor at USC and immigrant from Yugoslavia. So now you're in grad school and you're starting to do research, maybe after your first year, after you've bootstrapped a little bit. At what point did you think that, hey, this fun thing that I've been doing, which is now called research, is something that I want to do in a longer term way?
It's a good question.
Or maybe it was organic or gradual.
I think it was organic. I think that I didn't really stop to think whether, what are my options for the future, or, do I want to do this the whole life or not? I think I just went ahead and did what was in front of me. And then after a while, it became obvious that I will continue doing that. But it was, as many things in my life, at least, it was organic. It was kind of something that I stumbled into and ended up liking.
You mentioned a couple of mentors and role models. Your math teacher in high school was one, and then your research advisor in undergraduate was one. Were there others who also stand out?
Yes. So when I went to grad school, I came as a TA, which is a teaching assistant, and I really did not understand how to balance that role with the research. I came believing that, here I am, I'm doing the teaching assistant job and getting paid for it, and, didn't really understand what all the paper reading and research was about. Until the year passed. So I was assigned an academic advisor that was really just a formal assignment. It wasn't someone that was interested in doing research with me. And so I ended up doing well in one of the courses that was more research-oriented course. And by the end of that year, I was told that I need to select my research advisor. So I just went to that professor and asked if she wanted to be my research advisor, and she accepted somewhat grudgingly because I think she was very popular and everyone was asking. But we did end up writing a paper from that class and publishing it before I actually asked her. So it was, I guess, she was open to it. And so she was working with another professor on a common topic about denial of service attacks, which ended up being my focus for the grad school. And so she said, well, I can accept you, but there's this one project and I need someone to work on. So, that could be you. And so I ended up working on it, but we didn't really click because that was the year when she was on sabbatical and she had rather a large group. So I ended up actually interacting more with her colleague who was on the same grant. And he found a spot for me in his lab. And so by the end of the second year, we had another paper that I believe we either, published or was in writing. And then he came in and brought the topic that he wanted to discuss, which was denial of service attacks and how we could, propose defenses against them. And I came up with some ideas. We wrote up a grant proposal. That grant proposal was awarded, and then it became obvious that I should switch and work with him. And so he ended up being my PhD advisor, Peter Ryer. And he was amazing. Again, he was a really excellent advisor. He's, at least for me, it was the right balance of, pushing me ahead and giving me structure, but not really micromanaging. And I felt a lot of freedom in, choosing what I work on and where to publish, how to write it up. So that was good experience. And he had a rather moderately sized research group, let's say, not too big, not too small. It was Goldilocks size. And it was good experience to be part of the group, to hear what everyone else is doing. And yeah, that's when I really understood what research is about and that I like it.
Sounds like you got quite a bit of flexibility from your advisor in choosing your directions, and you got a little bit of a taste of what a faculty member might be doing while you were in grad school. Would you say that you particularly took to the security topic like a fish to water, that was a natural fit? Or do you think had your advisor been working on like something completely different, that would have been fine too and you would have done well in it too? I mean, this is a hypothetical question.
I think my first love has been networking, and it still is. And security is kind of, it's something that I like, and it's very related to networking. And there are also, it's related to other aspects as well that attract me, like, human-computer interfaces. And there are a lot of cybersecurity problems that we know how to solve technically, but they just don't work for humans. But I think that if he ended up working on something else, maybe I would have liked that too. I'm a person that likes a lot of things, which shows in in my choice of research topics as well. So,
is there a particular reason why networking is your favorite topic? What is it that attracts you?
I think it's just it's a nice blend of fairly different systems that come together and have to interact, and the protocol definitions that enable them to interact in a way that is correct and efficient. There are a lot of open problems still, even with protocols that are decades old. There is the opportunity to design new, more efficient, more secure protocols. So it seems like this whole separate world that once you understand it, you can find ways to make it better, and it, improves communication between people. It's just, I don't know, it was this blend of issues that I could relate to, and I could see how if we improve something, it improves experience for a lot of people.
I want to go to the next segment where we do a little bit of perspective. You've You've lived quite a few years in Serbia, and then many years here in the U.S. as well. So you've seen both the systems. You've also seen how, I'm sure you have family and friends in Serbia. Mm-hmm. So you've kind of seen how the Serbian system has moved on. Do you find that from what you hear and from what you know, that the Serbian educational system has changed massively now compared to what it was when you were in school, or is it a small change? How has it changed?
Well, I'm not sure how has it changed, like in all the details, because the things I hear are really here and there. It's not, yeah. I'm not sure I'm getting all the information. What I'm seeing is that there is a lot of more topics that people are trying to, put into the elementary and high school to cover all the relevant events in history, all the relevant, maybe some religious teaching that wasn't there before when I was in school. We were, as I said, we grew up in communism. We were not religious at all, so that's different. I think that, and also we are opening up to the world more, and we are becoming more receptive about, what employers want. So I think that university experience today is more relevant, more timely. People are better prepared for sure.
Mm-hmm. And there is a pretty strong growing tech sector in the Belgrade area as well.
Yes.
For students who sometimes struggle with self-doubt or with what is known as imposter syndrome, what advice do you have for these students, or for anyone who struggles?
That's a good question. So it's an excellent question. I want to say, especially to graduate students, I think in undergrad, maybe the process is more forgiving and you understand that everyone's finding their way. But I think when you come to grad school, you really feel this pressure to do well. And research is such a field that, no one knows if they are doing well or not. Everything is very hard. Everything is self-driven. You don't know if you are going to succeed or not, if you're addressing important problems or not. So it's really easy to get imposter syndrome. I mean, I have it constantly. I think everyone else has it. So I think what I wanted to say is that it's completely normal and expected. And everyone has it. Even the famous people have it. I talked at some point to someone who is really well published in networking field, and I wanted advice for a paper that I kept sending around, and it just wouldn't get in. And I thought it was very well done. I couldn't see a way to make it better, but it just kept being rejected. And, he said, well, yeah, that happens to me as well. And it was a big revelation for me that it doesn't just happen to me, it happens to everyone. And as time went on, I realized it from the other side when I became a professor, that it really happens for everyone. And, a lot of papers that we see today as very well cited papers and, amazing works in the field took years to publish because, after 6 months to a year of work on a topic, you get something that is submittable. But then, maybe it will get in, maybe you're lucky, but in most cases it doesn't, and you have to work more on it, then you maybe have to do more experience. It can be really a prolonged affair until it gets to publication. So that's one aspect, and I can say that, when I was a grad student, everyone I knew had self-doubt, had depression, couldn't sleep, was anxious. We had bunch of us, trying to remember what it's called, like when you're, I think it's repetitive motion syndrome, like when your joints start hurting from, typing and holding a mouse and stuff like that. But it was really the outcome of stress. So we were all majorly stressed. And a lot of us ended up going to therapists and doing counseling, and that was wonderful. Doing yoga, learning about meditation was really a lifesaver for me, and I think for a lot of my friends to go through the grad school and later, learn how to manage life. But I think that's, what really helped me in research, because doing research is hard and you get stuck and then you get over it. But I think publishing is the whole other aspect that it can be really discouraging. You might feel that you've done great research and you got great results, and then you write it up and then you send it in and you get really vicious comments that bury you. That go like, who cares, and why did you choose this topic, and this is not a great improvement, and stuff like that. And so it can be very defeating and hard to take. And it took me years, I think at least 10 years, to learn that I should not take this as a negative commentary on the research, but rather negative commentary on the writing. That I should view this as I wrote this up and it wasn't clear and the reviewer didn't get it. It doesn't mean I should now table this topic and, go and find another profession because I suck as a researcher. It just means that it needs better writing, it needs more experiments, it needs more, arguing why this is a good idea.
That's so true. For our listeners, Jelena Mirkovic has some awesome web pages that outline advice to grad students. Most of them are directed to her grad students. I was actually reading some of the pages right before we chatted, and I found a lot of that advice really, really useful. So I'm enjoying this part of the conversation a lot. Let me ask one more question along those lines of advice to those who are grad students. So sometimes students face a choice between an area that for their research that they kind of think they like or they might like versus another area that is really hot right now, but that they're not sure whether they like or not. How would you advise students navigate a choice like this?
I think that you should be aware of what you like or not, definitely, and don't go into something that you dislike. But also be aware that trends, what's hot, what's not, are really just like several year trends. It doesn't last. So there are a lot of topics that used to be hot a few years ago. Like everyone was doing blockchain. Now some people are doing blockchain, but definitely way fewer than then. Now machine learning is hot, so everyone's doing machine learning, even though it's been around for a while, but now it's like, more prominent. And so I think that these, seasonal changes are something that you should understand, and you should try to learn from them what you can. So definitely when, blockchain was hot, I learned what I could about it and how I could maybe leverage it in some of my ideas. But I think whatever you learn, you should bring back to what you really like working on, because there are a lot of aspects that you can borrow from one field and then or one direction and apply in another direction. Definitely don't choose something that you would be miserable with.
And the choice of, after one finishes one's degree, the choice of working in academia, being a faculty member or a research scientist versus working in industry. I'm sure you had to deal with that choice at some point of time as well. What advice do you have for students there?
So I would give the advice that I give when I talk about research and, master's versus PhD choice, which is a similar choice. I would say go into academia only if you really want to, because it is hard. It is rewarding. It's a great choice if you want to set your own research agenda and work on, whatever you feel like working and whatever interests you. But it is tough, because you end up pretty much whatever you did for your PhD, you end up doing this times 5 or 10 at the same time. So it's very diverse set of tasks, lot of multitasking. You feel the pressure to do well in many different aspects of your work, to be a great teacher, to be a great advisor, to, be a good colleague and do service to your department, to do, of course, great research and have it published and have it publicized. and, have it be impactful. And at the same time, these are the years when a lot of people, when they finish grad school, want to start family. So there's a lot of, balancing there. So it's overall a lot of balancing. It's not an easy life by any means. And it is less paid than working for industry. So if you have doubts, then kind of go work for industry a little bit and see if you like that better, and then come to academia. You won't close any doors, actually. You will have relevant experience that will make you more interesting to recruiters in academia than going straight from the grad school. Yeah, so one topic that I wanted to bring up that is relevant, I think, to immigrant experience is what happens when people back home need you, but you're here.
Yes.
And I think this is something that everyone is experiencing, not just from my area, but, from everywhere else, where you really feel torn. So I went through that when my parents were sick. So they both died in 2006. And, I was feeling really, but even before that, I knew they were elderly, they were kind of getting ill. And I think people might experience the same feeling of being torn if someone close to you is getting married, or, there are big life events that you're actually missing by just not being over there. And so I think that, really there isn't any solution. You just try to be as present as you can. I was lucky that I could, at the time when my parents were very ill and needed help, I could take a month or so off and go and really help and be there for them. But it did left this pain in my soul, that I felt that really I should have been there more. And I couldn't find a way to meet these two worlds. Like, it was not, I don't think that there is any solution, like you have to make a decision whether you're here or over there. But you end up feeling these, there are these big life events and people important to you that are on this other side of the world. And I think that gets even worse for immigrants that cannot easily go back for the reasons of, having, to do with their government, or, like, for example, when my parents passed away, my husband couldn't come for the funeral because he was at the time going through the green card process, and if he left the country, he couldn't come back. Similarly, people from China, once they leave, they need another visa to come back. So it's very hard for them. People from Iran, I don't even want to go there. Once they leave, who knows if and when they can come back to their country. So I think one important aspect when you talk with immigrants is to realize that they really just left everything behind at some point and then came, to like zero start.
Yeah. So the feeling of leaving physically everything behind, but not mentally everything behind, because the immigrant is in both the places, both in the country that they are in currently and their origin country at the same time. Right. I think you summarized that.
Yeah, and kind of feeling split in your allegiance too, because there are certain, now I've been here roughly the same time that I've been in Serbia. So I've lived in Serbia 23 years and I've lived here 23 years. So I'm at the, I can compare. There are some aspects that are better here and that I like. And then when I go home, people will say, well, you became American and, betrayed your history. And then there are some aspects that I like more in Serbia. And, you just kind of feel you're neither here nor there. And I don't think that ever resolves. I think you just end up being in two different places at once for the rest of your life. And then, the second generation feels like they are Americans, and that's about it. very different for people who, as me, left knowing they are not coming back. So I knew that I don't want to go back to live in Serbia because the economy was bad, the corruption was bad. At the time we were at wars, but the wars ended, but still like lot of aspects of daily life in Serbia are not the way I would like and I would expect. There is a big difference between that experience and experience of, say, French grad students that I knew they are coming for a few years and are going back to a job that they have already, been accepted to in France. And so that for them, US experience was a limited duration experience.
So you never considered going back? Is that what I'm understanding you're saying?
No, yeah, I didn't. I didn't for many reasons. Some of them being, again, just the system in Serbia is still. There's still a lot of corruption. There's still a lot of politics everywhere. The laws are kind of not consistently enforced. And so it's a system that I don't know how to live in. I understand how it functions, but I cannot live in such a system. I like it when it's more, more clear what the rules are, and then you just follow the rules. And
thank you so much. Thank you, Jelena.
Thanks.
Thank you once again for your time. As they say in Serbian, one of the few Serbian words that I know, hvala.
Molim.
On today's episode of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, you heard Jelena Mirkovic, Research Associate Professor at USC. Stay tuned for our next episode where Dejan Milojicic, Distinguished Technologist from HP Labs and IEEE Fellow, talks about growing up in a communal yard in the middle of 1970s Belgrade, of working while simultaneously studying, of traveling all over Europe, and making it out of Yugoslavia in the 1990s just in time before the war got started. If you haven't already done so, you can listen to the lead episode of this Yugoslavia segment, that's episode 1, featuring all the 3 narrators. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast.